Blockbuster. Yeah, remember Blockbuster? I used to go there all the time as a kid. We're looking at some blockbuster trade targets for the Miami Dolphins. Could Chris Grier swing big and add a massive addition to this Dolphins roster in the offseason? We're going to be primarily looking at some trade targets on the defensive line and offensive line on today's show. And there's no bigger potential blockbuster trade target than Maxx Crosby, the edge rusher from the Las Vegas Raiders. This is someone who has been in the trade rumor mill for some time now, not by his own wants or demands, but just from other teams wondering if they could get a piece of Maxx Crosby, who has been one of the best edge rushers in the NFL over the past 4 seasons. And I think there is a realistic pathway for him to be dealt. I don't bet on it. I probably would still project him to be on the Raiders in 2025, and he wants to be on the Raiders, right? Maxx Crosby has said multiple times that he wants to be a Raider for life. He bleeds silver and black. He doesn't want to leave the organization. But he's also expressed a desire to play for a winning team, and if he is not sold on the direction of the Las Vegas Raiders franchise, he could ultimately request a trade to go play on a different team. That's the same thing that would happen with Myles Garrett, and we saw Garrett request a trade. And even though I think that he likes the addition of Spytek at GM, Pete Carroll as head coach for the next 2 or 3 seasons, the Raiders still don't have a clear-cut plan right now for the quarterback spot. And let's be honest, folks, you can't win in the NFL unless you have a clear-cut quarterback that can win you football games. So maybe Crosby could request a trade if they don't find one in free agency or the NFL draft. And we'll talk more about Crosby here in just a second, but make sure you follow me over on Twitter. I'm talking about the Dolphins every day, and if news, rumors, anything happens surrounding the Miami Dolphins, I'll break it down on Twitter first, and I'll actually do follow for follow and give a shout out. First 5 people to follow me on Twitter from today's show, at Nic_Rohloff is the handle. I'll give you a shout out on a future show and follow you back. So go give me a follow right now. Let's get back to Maxx Crosby because I mentioned how good he is. Yeah, he really has been that dude, man. He battles through injuries. He's a warrior. He missed football games for the first time this last season. He has never missed games. He just simply always plays through injury, through sickness, through illness. It doesn't matter. He's on the football field performing for the Raiders. And the impressive thing for me with Maxx Crosby is that he has always done this without really having any help, right? Pass rushing is so difficult when the opposing offensive line hones in and narrows in on you. When you have multiple pass rushers that you can't double a guy like Crosby, well, then Crosby would have much closer to 20 sacks. But he's still putting up double digits a season, and he almost got double digits this past year despite only playing in 12 games. It's been very, very impressive. He is no doubt a top edge rusher in the NFL and a top 5 defensive player. He also plays the run extremely well. But as always, and we'll talk about the contracts for each of these trade targets, what would Miami ultimately be taking in? Crosby's under contract for 2 more seasons, which is an added benefit of trading for him. And when you look at what the Dolphins would take in, which Jack Sperry here at the channel said that we take in base salary plus roster bonuses, $22.8 and $19.6 million, which is relatively solid for a player of his caliber. Now, if you did trade for Maxx Crosby, you'd have to immediately extend him. He is getting closer to 29, 30 years old, but he's only 27 right now, so he's got a lot of football left to play, which is very, very good if you are giving the investment for Crosby. But the issue is that does this roster have the ability to trade for Crosby and be right there to contend? I'm not sure, because the price of acquiring him would just be astronomically high. This is what I came up with as a trade idea. I think without a question, the Raiders would be asking for multiple first-round picks. You will not be able to get him for 1 first-round pick. There is no doubt about that. So to me, I think you'd have to send your first-round pick this year, first-round pick in 2026, and probably another mid-round pick as well to try to get Crosby from the Las Vegas Raiders. And as much as Crosby would boost this Dolphins football team, creating a trio of him, Chop Robinson, and Jalen Phillips, I just don't know if it's worth giving that many draft picks and then having to extend them for a roster that has a lot of other holes and paying a lot of other big-time players like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey, and Tua Tagovailoa. But what say you? Would you trade for Maxx Crosby if you knew this is the price that it would pay to acquire Crosby in a trade from Las Vegas? Would you do it? Type Y for yes or type N for no. As much as it would be fun, I'm actually going to be holding off on Maxx Crosby. he would be generational in Miami. Him, Chop, and Jalen Phillips in 2025 would be disgusting. And then him and Chop for the future would be gross. But as I have talked with the Myles Garrett trade in the past, there is so many needs. Offensive line, defensive line, safety. You just need to use your draft capital smart. I don't think it's worth sending 2 first-round picks for Maxx Crosby, especially when you have to extend them. All right, how about a guy in DeForest Buckner? He comes in as a second blockbuster trade target for the Miami Dolphins, the defensive lineman from the Indianapolis Colts. Buckner's a solid player, man, and this one that is really intriguing to me because when you're talking about interior defensive linemen causing havoc, he is up there as one of the best. Like, he beats you in the run game, consistently at double digits, tackle for losses. Another player like Maxx Crosby that simply doesn't miss games. I remember reading off a stat earlier this year that Buckner sprained his ankle in week 2 of the season, and I believe the games that he missed were his first in his NFL career. Might have been just in his Indianapolis Colts career since being acquired in 2020. You see it, though, consistently creating pressure from the interior, being a menace in the run game. This would change your entire defensive line. And, yeah, he's a little expensive, but you would not have to give up a valuable asset to acquire Buckner. And you start to put a defensive line together of Zach Sealer, Chop Robinson, DeForest Buckner, Jalen Phillips. That starts to make out as a line that won't get bullied in the run game, will generate pressure from the outside and the inside, and that is how you start to kind of rebuild your defense in a way to recreate what the Philadelphia Eagles just did and why they were able to dominate the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Now, the one hook on DeForest Buckner is that his contract is pretty rough. You're on the hook for $23 million the next 2 seasons. Now, he is an unrestricted free agent in 2027, but you're going to have him for a couple seasons. And that is pretty good, right? Like with Maxx Crosby, both of these players have 2 years left on his deal. And I think if you trade for Buckner, he would not demand an extension right away, but you could give him a 1-year, 2-year extension to kind of lessen that money you owe him this year. And the reason why this is still something I might pursue, even with the money being so big time, is because you can kind of alleviate that and equal it out by releasing Bradley Chubb post June 1st. But the pick that you'd have to send to get him is not high. I think, and I was talking with Tom Downey here, our NFL guru at Chat Sports, and both of us agreed that you'd probably only have to send a late 3rd-round pick, early 4th-round pick to get DeForest Buckner because of that contract and age. So to me, sending that 98th overall projected comp pick in the late 3rd round to get Buckner could be a very fascinating idea for Chris Grier and the Miami Dolphins because it would generally change your entire defensive line if you're able to get Buckner into this group. Yeah, the contract's tough, but you don't have to send a high draft capital. You can still use your 1st and 2nd round picks to address safety and interior offensive line. Yeah, that's something that makes me very, very intrigued. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel, by the way, because we are talking trade targets, rumors, news. Join the channel today because anything that comes up around the Miami Dolphins, we'll talk about it. So join us here at the channel. All right, let's flip it over to the offensive side of the ball. We'll stay on the interior, though. Joe Thuney, the interior offensive lineman from the Kansas City Chiefs, who we actually talked about last week in regards of a potential Teron Armstead and Thuney swap. Thuney's been one of the best interior offensive linemen in football over the last 8 years for the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. And he, at age 33, just continues to dominate. You see the PFF numbers. Now, yeah, he did not have the best game against the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59, but he's also playing his position that isn't natural to him. He's a guard, but because the left tackle situation in Kansas City was so bad, they had him swap out there to play left tackle. He's normally a guard, but he was having to change his entire mindset, footwork, technique at left tackle, and he was doing a good job of it until they ran into the Philadelphia Eagles. And Thuney's contract is actually pretty solid if you were to make a trade for him. Now, he is a free agent after 2025, so if you trade for Thuney, you'd probably have to extend him or just accept the fact you're getting him on a 1-year rental. He's 33 years old. He'd be on the hook for $15.5 million next season, but you can alleviate some of that number and just give him a 2-year extension. I have no issue giving him a 2-year extension. I don't. I know he's 33. He's going to be 34 as a free agent, but you tell me you have him for age 33 season, 34 next year, 35 the year after, and then see where you're at with Thuney then, or maybe just wipe your hands there. I'd be fine giving Thuney a 2-year extension because I think you'd only have to pay him 15, maybe $16 million per season due to his age. This is a very intriguing possibility for Miami to address the interior offensive line for the future. And this was the trade idea that we talked about last week that was projected and thrown out there by Bleacher Report. And I'd be interested to do this, man. I know it'd be tough to get rid of Teron Armstead, but think about this. You drafted Patrick Paul in the second round of the 2024 NFL Draft. Are you really going to have him sit behind Armstead for 2 years in a row when he's on a 4-year rookie contract as he's a second-round pick? No, you got to get Patrick Paul in there at left tackle. And if you traded for Joe Thuney, swapped it for Armstead because the Chiefs need a left tackle desperately, Armstead can still play at a high level. It's a win-win for both teams. Thuney slides in at left guard for Miami, Paul at left tackle. Those two are set together on the left side of the O-line. Kansas City gets their left tackle. Then you just address right guard and for agency or the draft. Yeah, I think that'd be a pretty good idea for the Miami Dolphins. All right, final blockbuster trade target on today's show, Jordan Davis, the interior defensive lineman from the Philadelphia Eagles, former first-round pick, still on his rookie contract. And there are some intriguing scenarios where Philly could actually trade Jordan Davis because he has been relatively disappointing as a first-round pick. He was drafted in the top 15 of the NFL Draft 4 years ago. And he just has not given you the production that you would have expected in how dominant he was as a member of that Georgia Bulldogs defense. You see his career numbers, this hasn't been that good. And coming out of college, he was never supposed to be some dominant pass rusher from the interior. He's just a big body that takes up space, can dominate the run game, but also give you something in the pass rushing department as well. But he just really has been underwhelming. He really has. And talking with Eagles host Chase Sr., he's been telling me that former first-round pick starts slow, but start to pick it up a little bit. But we know that an emphasis on the defensive line is coming after the Super Bowl performance of the Philadelphia Eagles. But the price to acquire Jordan Davis, despite the priority of interior defensive line right now, still isn't that high. We both agreed that it's probably a third-round pick. Why? Because this is the 4th year of his rookie contract. You acquire Jordan Davis in a trade. You'd have the decision to make on his 5th-year option. You could either take it, you could decline it. And if you decline it, well, he's either a free agent after this year or you accept it and talk about an extension. But a third-round comp pick, again, same thing with DeForest Buckner. Buckner is obviously the way better player between him and Jordan Davis, but Davis is significantly younger. You could buy low on him. You can save a lot of money because the money you'd be taking in this season is very, very low because he's still on that rookie contract. It's only costing you $5 million. Davis could be an excellent DT2, potentially fresh change of scenery next to Zach Sealer, who's an established defensive lineman already. Davis can be your run stopper. Sealer can be the pass rushing hybrid defensive lineman. It's an intriguing defensive line possibility for the Dolphins, especially with it being a pretty relatively low asking price of a third-round pick. We talked about 4 blockbuster trade targets on today's show. Jordan Davis from Philly, DeForest Buckner from Indianapolis, Joe Thuney from Kansas City, and Maxx Crosby from the Las Vegas Raiders. We displayed what the hypothetical trade cost would be for all 4 players as well. Which one is your favorite? And I want you to factor in trade costs. Which trade would you do if you were the Miami Dolphins? If I had to choose, I actually saved the best for last. I think my personal preference would be buying low on Jordan Davis. I would. If you could get a former first-round talent in Davis who has been relatively productive, not as productive as he was hopeful to be. He's been passed up by Jalen Carter over there as well. But I think this would be a great opportunity for Miami because you'd get him. You'd get a potential 5th-year option where he's getting paid probably $13, $14 million next season, but not anything that's breaking the bank if you wanted to pick up that option. I think him and Zach Sealer would work very well together. Davis, the run-stuffing, Clogger, Sealer, that hybrid that I mentioned. And I'm all on the business of buying low on prospects that have a high upside still, but just haven't performed up to it. And especially where Miami's at in terms of their cap space restrictions and needing to get a lot of new talent into this building, I think Davis would be a good addition if he was available via trade. All right, that'll do it for today's episode. Make sure you do follow me on Twitter. Like I said ahead of time, first 5 people to follow me will get a shout out and a follow back, but you will be the beneficiary of following me because you'll get informed on everything surrounding this football team before we come up here and make a video on YouTube. So go give me a follow.